Hello and welcome to Book Yaps with Ash. I'm Ash. This is a show where I tell you about the books that I read in the past month-ish. No, it was just the past month. I don't know why I said ish. But right now I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in March. So, let's get the frick into it, because it's like, you guys don't have all day. I don't have all day, so let's talk about it. Book Yaps with Ash. The first one I'm going to talk about, before I forget, because I don't have it, is the 20-something treatment by Dr. Meg J. This is a self-help book that I listened to on audiobook. It was read by the author herself. This is a book written by a therapist whose main clientele is 20-somethings, so anyone between the age of 20 and 29, those are her main clients. And over her years, she's kind of learned a lot about this age group and is sharing her knowledge around it. So we genuinely, us 20-somethings, are a pretty anxious group of people. We are just drowning in uncertainty. We are trying to navigate life and struggling with it, and all of us are doing so at our own pace. And this book really breaks down lots of different elements of life, working, cooking, having friends, having relationships, and teaches you how to navigate those things in your 20s. The overall kind of theme of the message, and it's kind of cliche, is that it does get better. Your 20s, while the general knowledge is the 20s are the best years of your life, they typically are not. And most people find more stability and happiness and confidence in themselves in their later years, their 30s and their 40s. This comes from having a better understanding of who you are, having learned all of these things over the years, having often better financial stability. Lots of things impact that. And yeah, this was, I think, as self-help books go, this was probably my favorite one I've ever read. I don't often even get through them all because they're so repetitive, and it's just like, yeah, you could have written a blog post to drive this point home. We don't need 400 pages. I found that this one was really well written, really well split up. It didn't feel repetitive at all. It felt very validating, and overall, I definitely recommend it to anybody in their 20s who feels like they might be a little bit lost, feels like they might be stuck like this forever. This one will really help you understand that you won't be. Your adult life is just started, and you have lots to learn, and that's okay. So, shout out to Dr. Meg J for writing a self-help book that I liked. Okay, probably not going to say too much about this one because it's the fourth book in a series, but this is Wizard and Glass, the fourth and big book from the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. You can sit there. Fans of the Dark Tower either love it or they hate it. I actually feel like I was kind of in between. I listened to this on audiobook, and it actually took me about a month to get through. It was like 30 hours long. It takes you away from the main story, the main characters who you've come to love, and tells you the backstory of one of the characters, Roland. I found the backstory really helpful in understanding him, getting some more context of why he is the way he is. Overall, it was great. It was very Stephen King-y with a lot of characters and a lot of things happening at once, hence the length. There was a love story involved with Roland and Susan. Listen, I don't read a lot of straight romance, and I definitely don't read a lot of romance that takes place in the olden days, in like a fantasy world where there's like fancy speak and all that. I found their relationship to be very physical and based on attraction, which I think is the point, but I just didn't really like care or like root for them that much. I was kind of just like, oh, these are two really horny teenagers and they're star-crossed lovers. It reminded me a lot of Romeo and Juliet, and I don't know, the romance part I didn't really care for. And I have read Stephen King romance in 11/22/63, and I really loved that. I just found the one in this book to be meh. So yeah, I thought this one was good. I'm glad to have read it. I'm hoping to keep going with the series because it's super fun. The last little bit had some Wizard of Oz parallels, which weird timing for that to be kind of popular again, but I obviously loved that. And yeah, Wizard and Glass. The next one I read this month was We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies. This is a story of immigration, of displacement. It's written by a woman born in Nepal who now lives in Toronto, so is an immigrant. And it tells a fictional story of Tibetans who have had to flee their country because China is occupying it. This is all real things that have happened. They have set up a camp in Nepal as refugees, essentially. We get this story through 4 different characters. One of them, you get her childhood through adulthood as she lives in the camp in Nepal. The other one is her sister, who eventually moves from Nepal to Toronto and brings along the first character's daughter with her, who goes to school there. And then the 4th one is another more wealthy, well-off character who lives in Nepal, but has access to a few more luxuries than a lot of the refugees do. And the story spans over many years. It starts in the 1960s and goes till 2012, I believe. And it also spans quite a few different perspectives, having the 4 characters. So you're getting the one sister who is immigrated to Toronto had a harder time adapting, whereas the child she brought with her is now in university. She still doesn't really feel like a Canadian. She doesn't feel like she belongs, but she has adapted easier to the Canadian culture and the language. This was just a really interesting story on what it means to feel at home, what it means to belong, especially being a refugee who not only had to flee their home country, but then fled their refuge country to go across oceans to this place that's supposed to be like the best place to go, the place that's going to bring you the most success, when in reality you still feel like such an outsider. You still don't feel like you belong. And the way that the feelings these characters had was written just made it so easy to understand. It was written in such beautiful prose, but also it felt so simple, like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That would feel like this book was one that was a bit out of my comfort zone in terms of genre, in terms of writing style, but I'm really glad that I read it. It was truly a beautiful story. It was a sad story, but I think an important one. I think if you are interested in trying to understand the perspective of an immigrant or a refugee and you can't because you are not one, that this book will open those doors for you, help you understand things a bit better, and hopefully give you a bit of empathy towards folks who are put in that position. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I underlined a lot of quotes in this. I don't know if you can tell, but all of those little notches are pages with underlines, and yeah, really, really good book. The next book I read was also quite a bit out of my comfort zone in terms of genre, plot, writing style. It was one that I randomly stumbled upon at the library. It's called What Belongs to You by Garth Greenwell. The story starts off with our unnamed narrator. He is an American who lives in Bulgaria as a teacher. He comes in contact with Mitko, who he eventually starts paying for sex, and he falls for Mitko, but Mitko doesn't really fall for him. And through this relationship and through other teeny tiny plot points, you get to know more about our narrator's life and what he has been through. But really, this is a no plot, just vibes book, which I'm not normally into. But it had a lot of themes about having multiple selves, like which version of ourself that we will show to each different person in each different scenario. There are themes of possession, jealousy, envy, and transactional relationships. It's a sad gay story, so there's homophobia and all that awful stuff. But what made this really unique was the writing style of this one. I wonder if I didn't highlight anything, it's not my book. The way it was written it's written in a way where it feels like the narrator is just kind of telling you a story, not being able to remember all of the details, but just sharing what happened in the past. There's not really any dialogue, aside from little pieces here and there that really add to telling the story, but you're not going to get a back and forth conversation between the narrator and any characters. It's really all very past tense and relies more on descriptions and how this person, the main narrator, was feeling versus any other perspectives, which also kind of feels like he's an unreliable narrator in a way. You don't fully trust his account because you're only getting his account, which has been diluted by memory, it feels. So that's interesting. But overall, the writing style was very lyrical in its prose. It was it's on the more challenging side to read. It takes a little bit longer, but I found it quite beautiful and quite sad. Yeah, I don't know. This book was reviewed by the author of A Little Life, and that's something that really brought me in, and I can see why. I can see a lot of similarities between this one and A Little Life. Of course, this one's a lot smaller, but it's just a tragic story of just an ordinary person and what happens to him over the course of the story. Okay, another one I read was The Night House by Joe Nesbo. This is technically a horror book, but actually it was a lot more than that. It starts off with a bang, really. The main character, Richard, he's a 14-year-old boy. He's out with someone who's kind of his friend, kind of not his friend, named Tom. They end up at this phone booth, and Richard's like, oh, you call a random number and say you're the devil. And Tom doesn't want to, but he does, and then the phone sucks him up and eats him alive, basically. He disappears into the phone, all blood and guts and whatever. And that's how the book starts. Really crazy, but super fun. And then the first little bit of the story is Richard trying to figure out what the hell actually happened, and the cops trying to figure out where Tom actually went, because they obviously don't believe this phone booth story. Then halfway through the book, the whole story is completely flipped on a 180. That's all I'll say about that. Totally threw me. I didn't expect what happened midway through and the shift that the story took. And yeah, while it has horror elements to it, it's definitely more a story about trauma, about perception and memory, and how our memory or perception of an event can be very different from what actually happened. And that's something that you watch the main character kind of go through throughout the book. And yeah, I really loved this one. I found it pretty unique and different. If you're into horror but maybe not intensely, this one would be a good book to read, because like I said, there's like little bits here and there, but it's not the entire book. It's not just like tense the whole time and scary the whole time. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It was also, what I didn't know, translated from Norwegian, I think. So that's always fun to get a translated book. Yeah, great one. And lastly, my favorite book of the year so far, Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, the new Hunger Games book. I won't say too much about this one because I did create a whole video review dedicated to this book because it deserves it, because it was so good and also devastating. But what I will say is that I loved it. What I will say is that if you're a Hunger Games fan, you will love it. And what I will say is that these books should be taught in school. Mandatory. But it will hurt you. Yep, it'll hurt you to your core. Yeah, so those are the books that I read in March. Pretty good reading month. Got through quite a few books. And guess what I'm reading now? A new one, you were wondering? Because I have so many new ones in this house that I haven't read. Nope. Nope. A book I read when I was like 13. That's the copy from when I was 13. So whatever, okay? Everything happens when it's supposed to. And I'll read the books I haven't read when I want to. Is that all I wanted to say? I don't know. I think so. I'll probably remember something I wanted to say later, or when I'm editing this. But not now. Hope you have a good day. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching Book Yaps with Ash. I shouldn't sing.